In tonight's news edition, the King condemns the terrorist attack on the Boston Marathon that killed 3 people and left over 100 injured, and voiced the kingdom's rejection of all forms of criminal acts. Arab Israelis protest the anniversary of Israel's independence near Haifa as Palestinians prepare to mark Prisoners' Day tomorrow with protests in the West Bank and Gaza. And Qatar rejects criticism that it risks destabilizing the Middle East by supporting rebels in Syria, and says it is helping people and not interfering in governments. Good evening and welcome to the news at 10. His Majesty the King sent a cable to the U.S. President condemning the attacks on the Boston Marathon of yesterday. In the cable, King Abdullah offered his deepest condolences to the U.S. President over the loss of lives and wished the injured a speedy recovery. His Majesty reiterated Jordan's rejection of all forms of criminal and terrorist acts and voiced the kingdom's support of international efforts to fight terrorism so that people across the world can live in peace and security. Earlier, the government strongly condemned as a criminal attack the twin bomb explosions that targeted U.S. city of Boston, leaving 3 people dead. Official government spokesman and Minister of State for Political and Parliamentary Affairs, Mohammed al-Momani, said in a statement that Jordan's principled position is rejection of such criminal or terrorist acts that targets innocent civilians under any name and from any source. He offered the condolences of the Jordanian government to the U.S. government and people, as well as to the victims' families, wishing the injured a quick recovery. In Washington, U.S. President Barack Obama said the Boston was an act of terror. In a statement at the White House this afternoon, Obama said the American people refused to be terrorized because what the world saw yesterday in the aftermath of the explosions were stories of heroism, kindness, generosity, and love.
This was a heinous and cowardly act, and given what we now know about what took place, the FBI is investigating it as an act of terrorism. Anytime bombs are used to target innocent civilians, it is an act of terror. What we don't yet know, however, is who carried out this attack or why, whether it was planned and executed by a terrorist organization, foreign or domestic, or was the act of a violent individual. That's what we don't yet know, and clearly we're at the beginning of our investigation. It will take time to follow every lead and determine what happened, but we will find out. We will find whoever harmed our citizens, and we will bring them to justice.
Meanwhile, U.S. investigators are on the hunt for the bomb and for a motive behind 2 explosions that ripped through crowds near the finish line of the Boston Marathon, killing 3 people and causing horrific injuries. More than 176 people were injured at the event when tens of thousands had turned out to watch the race. Zain Abu Soufe has the details.
The deadly explosions at the Boston Marathon were the worst bombings in the U.S. since security was tightened after the attacks of September 11 in 2001. Witnesses have been recounting the moment the event turned into chaos, as it was captured by amateur video.
I mean, there were just families all around us with kids, yelling and screaming, and we just wanted to try and get away as quick as possible.
Yeah, it was loud. It was really, really loud, and then people, just chaos everywhere.
Massachusetts officials say they will go to the ends of the earth to find those responsible for the attack.
As an ongoing investigation, our investigation certainly will not be confined, very likely, to the city limits of Boston. It would extend out to the eastern Massachusetts area. This will be a worldwide investigation. We will go where the evidence and the leads take us. We will go to the ends of the earth to identify the subject or subjects who are responsible for this despicable crime, and we will do everything we can to bring them to justice.
Earlier, the White House said the mobbings would be treated as an act of terror, and U.S. President Barack Obama vowed that those responsible would feel the full weight of justice.
The administration, the White House, is trying to be very careful. They want to make clear that this is definitely an act of terror and that we've seen the killing of innocent civilians who are just watching a race. But we don't know if it's an act of organized terrorism, whether it's a foreign group doing this or a domestic group. It could just be an individual.
In the wake of the attack, Boston Marathon finish line and the blocks were closed to traffic as police searched for evidence of the identity of who placed the bombs. While investigators tried to determine what happened, early reports sought to link the Boston blasts to domestic right-wing extremists. Cities across the United States stepped up security, increasing their police presence in urban areas and taking other precautions, including Washington and New York City, the sites of the September 11 attacks. Zaina Abu Sufa for the News at 10.
Back here at home, the lower house of Parliament began a debate on the government's policy statement presented to the House on Sunday. Prime Minister Abdullah Mansour delivered the statement in hopes it will win him the confidence of lawmakers. The session began this morning under Speaker Saad Masroor and in the presence of Mansour and members of his cabinet, which was sworn in by His Majesty the King on March 30th. Deputies are each allocated 15 minutes of speaking time to air their views on the government's policy statement, while blocks are allocated 20 minutes each. About 130 of the 150 lawmakers are expected to present their cases during the multi-session debate. Her Majesty Queen Rania called on Al-Maymuna Secondary School for Boys in Madaba, the first boys' school in the kingdom to receive the gold accreditation in the Healthy School program. Launched by the Health Awareness Society in 2008 in partnership with the Ministry of Health and the Ministry of Education, the program sets standards that guide schools to develop and reach a healthy living, learning and working environment. Her Majesty met with teachers, students, parents, and local community leaders who have worked to improve the health standards of the school. She also inspected the school facilities that qualified it for the 2011-2012 Gold accreditation. A total of 75 schools had participated in the program last year, while this year 88 schools took part, 68 of which made it to the finals. 8 are private sector schools and 1 is an UNRWA school. Thousands of Arab Israelis gathered to protest on the 65th anniversary of Israel's independence, meeting in the village of Khubeiza near the northern coastal city of Haifa. The protesters waved Palestinian flags in solidarity with their brothers living in the West Bank and Gaza, and to confirm their affiliation and roots, as well as to confirm the Arab identity of Palestinian land. The date of Israel's independence changes every year and is determined by the Hebrew calendar. However, Palestinians mark the formation of Israel every year on May 15, the day they call Nakba Day, when hundreds of thousands of Palestinians fled or were forced to leave their land and homes because of the founding of the State of Israel in 1948. Meanwhile, Palestinians in the West Bank and Gaza are preparing for Prison Day, an annual Palestinian rite that commemorates the detainees and is set for tomorrow. A hunger strike by a number of prisoners and the deaths of 2 inmates in custody this year have off deadly clashes with Israeli security forces that some analysts say could snowball into a third Palestinian uprising. Street violence with Israeli security forces is anticipated during tomorrow's Prisoner Day protest, setting to take place across the West Bank and in Gaza. Muhammad Al-Fuqaha has more.
Today, school children in Gaza released balloons to show their support for Palestinian prisoners who have been detained by Israeli authorities. The children wore hats the colors of the Palestinian flag, and after chanting and holding posters of the prisoners, released hundreds of balloons into the sky. Many of the red, green, black and white balloons carried messages as they floated away. A spokesman for the Prisoner Association, WAD, said that all the Palestinians should support those in detention.
All elements of Palestinian society should share in defense operations and the championing of prisoners. And so we arranged this event, where around 1,000 Palestinian students and children are taking part to show their solidarity with the prisoners in the occupation's jails, and then release the balloons of freedom that inscribed with letters that are directed at the national movement.
And to illuminate the plight of nearly 5,000 Palestinians jailed in Israel, activists open a replica of a former Israeli prison in Gaza. Murals of leaders of Palestinian resistance groups who were once held in the Saraya prison hung on walls at the site, along with a banner listing the names of 12 detainees who died in the prison, which locals named the slaughterhouse. Israel currently holds 178 Palestinians as administrative detainees jailed without trial as suspected militants for renewable 3 to 6 month terms based on classified evidence. Local authorities say 800,000 Palestinians have been detained under Israeli military orders since the 1967 war, when Israel captured the West Bank, East Jerusalem and Gaza. Hamad al-Fuqaha for the News at 10.
Over to Syria, President Bashar al-Assad cut prisoners' sentences to mark the holiday of Evacuation Day. The day commemorates the departure of the last French soldier in Syria, ending France's occupation and allowing the proclamation of full independence on April 17, 1946. The move reduced prisoner terms of inmates held for crimes and misdemeanors, and also cut by a quarter the jail terms of Syrians who had joined the rebels trying to topple the regime. The decree was announced on state news agency Sana and on the Syrian TV, but did not state the number of prisoners to be released. Syria's Minister of Justice, Dr. Najm Hamad al-Ahmad, said this decree has been granted in order to begin national reconciliation and in order for Syrians to live together. But Syrian opposition leader Muaz al-Khatib said the reduction would be seen as a positive gesture only if the women and children among the detainees were released in the coming days. Meanwhile, Qatar rejected criticism that it risked destabilizing the Middle East by supporting rebels in Syria or the Muslim Brotherhood, and said it is helping people and not interfering in governments. Qatar's Prime Minister Sheikh Hamad bin Jassim Al Thani told a news conference with German Chancellor Angela Merkel after talks in Berlin that Qatar had tried to convince Damascus in the uprising to consider reforms but met obstructions by Assad. Sheikh Hamad is heading a delegation of Qatari businessmen and government officials in Berlin for an investment conference. He said Qatar's goal is to help the Syrian people realize their wishes and aspirations, adding that Merkel had echoed this view in her detailed discussion of the two-year conflict.
After the start of the Syrian revolution, I was in Damascus twice, but there was no echo whatsoever. All we found were delays from the Assad government and the belief that only a military solution will be a solution. That's why we changed sides to the Syrian people, but not with the aim of destabilizing the Syrian regime. Our aim is for the Syrian people to fulfill their wishes.
Merkel said Assad had lost his legitimacy and is not open at the moment to a political solution. She added that while her country's constitution prevented her from sending arms to areas of tension, Germany's position in the conflict is undisputed.
Assad's readiness to for a political solution is non-existent, and this obviously influences the course of the German government. In this sense, we are cooperating with Qatar.
On the ground in Syria, amateur videos posted on a social media website showed the aftermath of airstrikes in the city of Douma and a rebel attack in Damascus. In Douma, footage showed 2 injured women helped out of a damaged building. Other footage, also said to be shot in Douma, shows an aircraft flying past, followed by audio of an explosion as thick white smoke rose in between buildings. In the capital, the video showed the aftermath of a rebel car bomb attack on a military checkpoint. Over to Iran, a 7.8 magnitude earthquake struck the southeast of the country near the border with Pakistan. Tremors from the quake were also felt in Pakistan, India, United Arab Emirates, and Qatar. In Pakistan, 13 people were killed and hundreds of houses destroyed. The quake also shook tall buildings in India's capital, New Delhi, while the United Arab Emirates and Qatar people were evacuated from buildings, but no casualties in these countries were reported. Iran sits on major geological faults and has suffered several devastating earthquakes, including a 6.6 magnitude quake in 2003 that killed more than 2,500 people. North Korea issued new threats against South Korea, vowing retaliation if the South did not apologize for anti-North Korean protests yesterday when the North was celebrating the birth of its founding leader. The North's news agency said the North Korean army had issued an ultimatum to the South after yesterday's rallies at which portraits of North Korea's leaders were burned. But along with the new threats, the North's news agency raised the possibility of dialogue. Here's more on the war of words.
Amid a war of words on the Korean peninsula, North Korea's leader marks the birthday of the country's founding father. On Tuesday, state television showed Kim Jong-un honoring his grandfather's 101st birthday. While some analysts had expected a military parade, the day instead appeared to be marked by a festival of flowers. Other events saw Kim enjoying a concert. He also watched soldiers play a sports tournament. It came amid tension in the region as the North made new threats of military action against South Korea. At the South's border with its northern neighbour, tourists on Tuesday were eager for a glimpse of the reclusive state. South Korea has condemned the threats from the North, calling the rhetoric regrettable. A defence spokesman says the country remains on guard against any missile launch. North and South Korea are still technically at war after the conflict in the 1950s ended in a truce.
North Korea has also rejected U.S. overtures for talks, saying it will not be humiliated into being dragged to sit at the negotiating table by Washington. The statement by the North Korean Foreign Ministry described overtures as cunning and rejected calls to sit at the talk tables, with broadcast today by state-run television. U.S. calls for talks were made by Secretary of State John Kerry in Seoul last week, who said Washington was open to dialogue with Pyongyang on the condition that the talks would lead to eliminating nuclear arsenal from the North. Meanwhile, U.S. President Barack Obama said while he does not believe North Korea has the capacity to mount a nuclear weapon on a ballistic missile, the U.S. is preparing for every contingency. Obama told NBC Today's show he hopes to contain the situation through diplomacy, but that precautionary measures are necessary, and that's why he ordered the repositioning of missile defense systems to guard against any miscalculation on the North's part. Former Pakistani President Pervez Musharraf's bid to enter politics was refused when an election tribunal rejected his candidature for a parliamentary seat. The former army chief returned last month after nearly 4 years of self-imposed exile to contest a May 11 general election, despite the possibility of arrest on various charges and death threats from the Pakistani Taliban. The polls are seen as a key moment in Pakistan's attempts to shake off the legacy of decades of military rule, because they represent the first time a democratically elected civilian government has completed a term in office. During an interaction with the media at his house in Islamabad, Musharraf unveiled All Pakistan Muslim League manifesto and gave tickets to members for the May polls.
As the election is drawing near, this is the first time that we are showing our strength. I knew that around 700 or 800 or 1,000 people were applying, and I had to sift through them. Let me tell you that my people are standing opposite many old and established candidates. My prayers are with them, and God willing, they will defeat them.
A village in northern India is home to an extraordinary number of identical twins born in one location. The elders in the village say they have over 108 identical twins in the village out of a total population of around 600. The village has no health center and just one school, yet the locals still revel in their proud record and narrate incidents of mistaken identities to bemused visitors. Even the animals in the village have been documented to give birth to twins. The London Marathon, which many expected to be cancelled after the Boston blast, will go ahead as planned in the British capital this Sunday, but security will be a focal point. The 42-kilometre marathon will attract 36,000 runners, among them Britain's double Olympic champion Mo Farah. Mayor of London Boris Johnson said police would be taking all necessary precautions. The Metropolitan Police Force is reviewing its security arrangements in liaison with race organizers and stressed it is premature to talk of any threats.
We are working with the London Marathon to make sure that we have all of the tactics in place that we need, but I would stress again there has been no change at all to the terrorism threat to the UK at the moment.
Fernando Verdasco suffered a surprise defeat in the Monte Carlo tennis second round. The Spaniard was beaten by Australian Marinko Matasovic, who won in straight sets 7-5, 6-3. Matasovic will now face 8-time champion Rafael Nadal in the third round. We stay in the same tournament. 8th seed Janko Todorovic suffered another early exit when he was beaten 7-6, 6-1 by Bulgarian Grigor Dimitrov. 21-year-old Dimitrov is regarded as one of the most gifted prospects on the tour, easily prevailed over the Serb and wrapped up with a subtle backhand pass. In the world of the NBA, Miami Heat barely beat the Cleveland Cavaliers 96-95. The Heat's main player, LeBron James, did not participate. However, Norris Cole did not disappoint fans, scoring 16 points, 11 rebounds, and 9 assists. Kyrie Irving scored the final 4 points of the game for the Cavs, hold them within 1 point with 19 seconds remaining. Cleveland then fouled Cole, who missed both free throws, to give the home team possession with 14 seconds left on the clock. Miami improved their Eastern Conference leading record with just one game in the season, a home game against the Orlando Magic tomorrow. And finally, for a quick look at the weather, partly cloudy tonight with westerly moderate to brisk winds and a chance for light rain. Another slight drop in temperature is expected tomorrow, creating relatively cold and partly cloudy weather with a continued chance for showers in the northern and central regions. The Gulf of Aqaba should expect fair weather tomorrow with northerly moderate winds and slightly high seas. The weatherman warns of poor visibility due to dust, especially in the desert areas. Next are the lows and highs for tonight and tomorrow. To end the news, here's a reminder of our top stories. His Majesty the King condemns the terrorist attack on the Boston Marathon that killed 3 people and left over 100 injured, and voiced the kingdom's rejection of all forms of criminal acts. Arab Israelis protest the anniversary of Israel's independence near Haifa as Palestinians prepare to mark Prisoners' Day tomorrow with protests in the West Bank and Gaza. And Qatar rejects criticism that it risks destabilizing the Middle East by supporting rebels in Syria and says it is helping people and not interfering in governments. With that, we come to the end of tonight's news. I'm Nancy Khair. Thank you for watching and have a good night.